Yeah, Trevor was.
Sure.
That's his part.
I'm down with it. Need to do some adjustments, but that's.
Perfect. Okay, we are live. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order at 7:01 on Tuesday, April 12th. We'll do our Treaty 6 acknowledgement. As we gather here today, we acknowledge we are on Treaty 6 territory in the homeland of the Métis. We pay our respect to the First Nations and Métis ancestors of this place and reaffirm our relationship with one another. So we do have a couple last minute items. We'll go up here. So I guess just for last minute items, just that there's just different versions of the list, accounts and checking listing, right?
Correct. It's been updated on that'd be item 7.2 on the agenda, so it should be correct in the system, but I've also circulated a hard copy in case anyone didn't have access.
Thank you for that. And then the other one, the services agreement we're doing in regular meeting or
In camera.
in camera? Okay. Alright, so then the other two are just for in camera, so then everything else should remain the same. Just a motion to adopt the agenda, please.
So move.
Seconder?
I'll second.
Motion by Councillor Clausen, seconded by Councillor Battery. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Okay, motion is carried. We move on to motion to approve the minutes for March 22nd, 2022. Just needing-
Also move.
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion on the minutes? We'll call the question. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion is carried. Move on to 5, which is the correspondence RCMP LaRange Detachment Quarterly Report.
Everything I'm clicking on the same file not found. They were opening earlier.
Refresh your sign in. I find that's often happens.
I have a question for you. Was there any possibility for Staff Sergeant to come in and talk about the quarterly report?
Yes, I had a discussion with him about what he had done historically, and he said it was kind of a mixed bag. Sometimes came, sometimes didn't. But I said after this one, I'd like for him to present and answer questions of council.
Okay.
So we'll coordinate that for future quarterly reports.
Okay.
Would be nice to see them once in a while.
Yeah, that would be great. And I'm gonna add another piece to the in-camera for this discussion further. But that's fine. Does anybody have any questions about this quarterly report?
Not about the report, but just about that consultation piece that was sent around earlier about RCMP asking our input on what they're wanting to see. Is that something that we should discuss and decide on collectively or respond individually? It was something that you had forwarded.
Yeah, I'm not sure how council would like to approach that one, but we could tackle it in camera tonight too if we want to.
Okay, I think that would be wise, just so that we're, and then, because we'll give you guys an update on our meetings as well. I think would be a good idea.
And then that way the RCMP will get one recommendation from this office.
Yeah, I think that's great. Okay, just a receive and file.
So move.
I'll second.
Okay, so motion by Councillor Bashar, seconded by Councillor Clausen. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion's carried. Moving on to committee minutes reports. 2022 Wildfire Outlook Report from. Sorry, I'm just having a little slow.
Is it SPSA?
Yeah, Keaton, did you want to speak a little bit about what's coming forward here?
So this is just for information only. I'll just highlight some of the items in the report here. So NRC, or Natural Resources Canada, released their wildfire outlook for 2022. It looks to be as expected for boreal forest, which we live in, so nothing too out of the ordinary. By comparison, last year we were extremely high in their severity, and it really showed. So this year's kind of looking a little bit normal, anyways. There are some of the things that we're doing internally. So we have the Fire Smart projects that are happening throughout the community. Those are extended until the end of April. Just they're just making use of all the snow that's left, and they can kind of do some more burning and churning there. Emergency Operations Center upgrades at the fire hall, those are slowly coming along. We're just waiting for fiber internet to get finally installed after they're done at the airport. ICS training that's for all councils, ICS 402, and that's coming on April 20th. And we have wildfire training for our firefighters, which will be happening in the coming weeks. So, and then I also attached that report for you guys to review. So happy to take any questions if you have any.
How did the fuel management go this winter?
They didn't get everything completed, just due to the deepness of the snow. So whatever's not completed this year will just get tacked on to next year.
Okay. Any other questions for Keaton around the wildfire outlook report?
It's good to hear you're training some of our members for some wildfire stuff.
Yeah, the SPSA is actually all kind of in-house. In return, we'll teach them how to use hydrants and kind of hook up to their trucks. So
That's pretty good.
collaboration between two agencies.
Yeah, because back in 2015, that wasn't the case, and everyone had their areas they had to be in. You couldn't really go help anybody else,
Yeah.
so it'd be good to have that.
Okay. Any other questions? Just need a motion to receive and file.
Also move.
Seconder?
Second.
So motion by Councillor Vedder, seconded by Councillor Bashar. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all opposed say nay. Motion's carried. Move on to spring flooding concerns. Lyle, is there anything else you need to add to this other than what's already been presented?
Nothing at this time.
No. Okay, does anybody have any questions, comments about what's been presented? So it seems to me like there's not any concern at this time, and then we were also denied any, what's the right word for that, any protection if we need it, right?
Flood mitigation equipment.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank
we were denied that.
Okay, yeah, any further questions? Alright, so receive and file, please.
Just a question out of council, would you still like us to invite them to a future council meeting to have a discussion, or how would you like to proceed on that?
I think personally what I'd like to still see is I'd still like to see that, because we're going ahead with that letter, right?
Yeah, I just haven't heard from the partners at all, so
Oh, okay.
if you wish to proceed on our own, we could do that, or we could just not send a letter and invite them to council, or any combination thereof.
Okay, as far as I understand it, there was interest, so for me, I'd like to see, just reach out again, cause I think what what council was sort of feeling is that we need some sort of local representation, at that board level, to make sure that they're looking after the top part of that dam. So that's what I'd prefer to see happen, if that's okay, and then if you don't hear from the partners, then I think we send the letter anyways.
I think send it anyway too, and requesting that they have a local individual for that position, whether it was a part-time or contractual basis. I think it would be super valuable.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, just need a motion for receive and file, please.
Also move.
Seconder?
I'll second.
Motion by Councillor Clausen, seconded by Councillor Vedder. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all opposed say nay. Okay, the motion's carried. Move on to 2022 budget amendments. Trevor, did you want to speak a little bit about what's been presented tonight?
Do you want me to go over?
Yeah, I'll let Trevor speak a little bit. We're gonna, in the discussion section, when we talk about budget / paving, he'll give a bit more of a background as to some of the things we wanted to talk about. But this particular report is essentially some amendments, an update, and was a reduction from what was approved. So unless council has questions about any of the specific amendments that resulted in a reduction, nothing more to say on that one.
So just for clarity, how much are we going into our reserves this?
Yeah, I'll let Trevor expand on it, but essentially it's going to depend. The budget itself, to fully fund it, was around 3.3 million. However, there's a number of things. We've obviously identified a grant, Trevor, has, that we could access that would reduce that by 1.2 million or so. We also have several items that, although we would order, we wouldn't be paying for a year or so down the road. So the reality is, even if the capital plan is quite aggressive, and if we don't achieve, which we for sure won't, on, for example, ordering the heavy rescue unit, it's not going to come this year. We're not going to pay it for this year. So we could come back with more of an analysis of what is likely to get executed and what the impact might actually be, but the budget as approved to do absolutely everything was around 3.3, and I'll let Trevor speak more.
Yeah, so I mean, basically the budget that was presented, it's more on the financial books, and I know a lot of you that have businesses, you know there's a difference between what's in the bank and what the actual books are, right? So basically, the way to do this best is to simplify things a little bit, and I don't know, should I start going through a lot of this, or? I might as well since we're talking about it. So typically in the past, and going forward, all budgets and financial statements have a specific format of what we are basically governed to follow. We have to follow it. It's called PSAB. It's the Public Service Accounting Body. It was implemented in 2013 and was required as a reporting standard shortly after. I believe it was 2015. And the reason they do that is so that all municipalities are sort of accounting the same way. And the biggest issue with it is the capital expenditures. So like I explained before, when you buy a building, you're not, you're giving out the money right away, but on paper, you're paying for it over several years, right? So there is that kind of an issue that kind of skews things a little bit. First of all, in times when there's lots of capital purchases made, more funds may come out of the bank account than what the financial statements or the budgets show. And in times of less capital purchases, the result is completely the opposite, right? Another issue with this is that the way the accounts are set up, there's a lot of items that can affect our cash flow that have absolutely nothing to do with the budget, such as like holding accounts, trust accounts. One of the things that the government of Saskatchewan likes to do is put out grants, and with some of these grants, they'll give you the full amount of money, and if you don't spend it, you have to give it back. So it's not considered profit, it's not, and I mean, there are some of those things that I'm still trying to figure out. The auditors are working with me, and it's getting there. But again, the cash flow and the budget are two very different things, and because of this, going forward, I'll make sure that I have the impacts on both when I report stuff to council, so that you can understand everything. So in the approved budget, we initially indicated the budget would have a deficit of 1.769 million. Again, it's PSAB reporting requirements that we are required to report in our budgets and financial statements. Doesn't reflect our cash flow. Within that budget, the actual operating deficit, so the actual how we have to run our business, is going to be about a $300,000 deficit. Okay, and so that basically, paying for pretty much the employees, anything that we're going to need for on a day-to-day basis. And then the actual capital was 3.092. Now at first this looks like a large number, but we will break it down a little bit. So there were a lot of issues last year, and part of these budget amendments sort of speak to it, where there was stuff that was ordered and not delivered due to supply chain issues. Some of those were the trucks that we had to put into the amended budget there. I just found out about them a couple weeks ago, and I was told, oh, we ordered them last year, they weren't in the budget. I'm like, oh, come on. But anyhow, so there's things like that where that's going to happen. Keaton's heavy rescue unit, we're not actually going to be spending this year. So that's, $450,000 right off the top, right? In addition to this, due to the aggressive nature of our capital projects, there's so many things that are either broken down, past their useful life, or with the infrastructure, it just needs to be fixed, or things are going to get really bad. Because we were so aggressive in going after things, I would guess that we'd have at least 10% slippage of that, and likely closer to 15%. So if it was 10%, that'd be another 300,000 right there. So right there, I'm putting out there probably close to somewhere around 750 would not be spent right off the top. In addition to these drops in spendings, I've looked around and I found that we have a grant that's available to us that's specifically for La Ronge that's been available since 2019 for $1.2 million for capital projects.
Where's that from?
Well, it's from Brad Henry's office.
Mhm.
It was sent out to Mayor Wojtowicz, so it's quite a ways back, the initial letter. But, and it's mainly used just for capital. There's a couple catches with it though, is that we have to have our financial statements done,
Mhm.
and it's gotta be before July 1st of whatever year. I'm expecting the financial statements to be done April 30th, so it gives me about a 2-month window to get things through and approved.
But then we have to finish a project before.
No.
Oh,
No, we just have to submit the paperwork for the grants and we're on there.
This is a one-time grant or is this an annual?
Yeah, this is a one-time grant, so, you know, and we have a lot of capital projects, so it's not gonna be tough to find the 1.2 million. So, you know, if we can get that completed, like that's on the top of my radar right there, now you're looking close to 2 million off the top. So we're in a lot better position than sort of what things are looking like. The other things on this is that I'm finding things within our GL, our general ledger, that are affecting both the books and our cash flow in different ways. One of our issues is that we haven't been sending out like statements for amounts owing in probably close to 2 years. And so I've been going all over this, and lately I've had to clear off a lot of things because contractor comes up to do some work, gets a business license from Saskatoon 2 years ago. They had it set up to automatically rebill the guy. And so this contractor doesn't come up here for another 2 years, but all of a sudden I send out the statements and it says he owes another $200 for 2 more business statements. Doesn't affect our cash flow, but it's gonna affect our financial statements because that money, I'm having to reverse a lot of those. On the other hand, I'm finding a lot of people that do owe money that didn't realize it and they're paying us. So that is affecting our cash flow, but it has nothing to do with financials because that hit us a few years ago. We're finding that a lot in AR, but we're also finding a lot in tax payments as well for just people's tax property stuff, where that's gonna be a lot of money because there is a lot of money that's outstanding in there. I'm hoping to get lots on there. We have a tax enforcement company that helps us with that, and we've had that for a while, but we're really starting to see that we're making a lot of headway on that. So again, that's not gonna be something that affects our book numbers, but it's gonna affect our cash flow in a positive way. So then you gotta ask the other question, when all of those are factored in, let's say we don't get the grant for some reason, or we don't, you know, something goes crazy, what do we look at there? In my opinion, we still need this stuff. After we get a lot of this infrastructure, because it hasn't been kept up properly and hasn't been on file, we're not really gonna need a lot going forward. I suspect in the subsequent years, we're probably gonna have about 200,000 to 300,000 minimum of an operating surplus going forward in multiple years, in subsequent years. That's even if we don't get any extra grants, if we don't get any extra stuff to help us out. So I honestly think that even if we do go over and spend quite a bit this year, we're actually in a pretty decent position. Our cash flow is very good.
Just a kind of like question that stems from that. Will this put us in a better position to get an asset management program like really going and solidified and set
yeah.
up? And
Like I'm already on top of that with the asset management, yeah.
Good.
The thing is that with so much of our stuff being at the end of its life, it's pretty easy to make a list of what we're buying because a lot of the stuff is kind of useless to us anyhow, and it's going to be disposed of or sold or whatever, and it's not going to be considered a usable asset. So yeah, that's my whole plan. I've already started making my asset listings and looking at what we're going to need for the future. And you know, going forward after, besides Keaton's truck here, that after we purchase that, you know, there's not going to be a huge amount of things. There might be a truck here or there, or a vehicle here or there, or, you know, a piece of machinery, but we're not going to need to spend like this in the future, at least as far as I can see. Now there is a couple other things that we can talk about later that may affect a few things as well, but I honestly think that we're actually in a very good situation, which brings me to our financial statements for last year. Now, I do have some bank statements printed out here from our bank account, and these are very accurate. These match up our accounts. Our cash flow, we actually gained about $2,000 in our bank accounts last year through all of 2021, from January to December. Our financial statements are probably going to show somewhere in the neighborhood of about a $1.2 million loss, just because of capitalizing stuff. There was a lot of buildings purchased recently and renovated and whatnot. So we're going to have about a $1.2 million deficit. It's mainly going to be on paper. It really won't affect a lot. So you can expect, like, we are all over this 100%. Like, I'm always watching what things we're approving, what projects are going through and whatnot, and adjusting accordingly. So, I mean, even though we are spending, you know, close to $3 million here, above, you know, granting and stuff like that, I don't think that it's a bad thing, and especially not if, you know, we can get some more of these grants and stuff like that. But
A lot of it's definitely necessary, and even like the new heavy rescue truck, the majority of it is funded by other means anyway. We're gonna get a check for it, but most of that's gonna come back to us.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, well, yeah, exactly, and
Most of it, like 90% of it's gonna come back, so.
yeah, and so when you look at that, and then you look at some of the other things, like, yeah, I honestly think we're in a great position. It just may not look as good on paper.
So, with your expertise in all this, because this is very high level conversation for me, anyways, it makes me happy to understand that you do feel comfortable with what's being presented here today. Does this give you any concern for upping our taxes or doing anything that we need to do to recover our reserve funds moving into the future?
Well, that's part of the reason I didn't really want to go with that in this budget, is because, number one, I wanted to see sort of how things played out a bit, because I wasn't exactly sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I do see a surplus for next year. So I mean, I'm not seeing that it's necessary at this point. The only thing that's a really unknown is inflation.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, especially, you know, all the vehicles have gas. The cost of everything's going up.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it may be something we want to revisit later, but at this time, I don't think that that's necessary.
Okay.
And I just a caveat to that too, though, is ultimately at the end of the day, it depends on what council wishes to do, especially with regards to capital. Just because with the rec center or with the waste treatment or whatever project comes up, of course, you know, from an operating perspective, we don't see anything on the horizon that's going to be a real problem. There's actually things that are coming off the books, whether that be contracted services that we've had to deal with over the last period of time, or whether that's the policing, enhanced policing or what have you. So from an operating perspective, there's a lot of things that are coming off the books, which is great. But you can turn around and spend that on $1 million in paving too. So like at a drop of a hat. So it really ultimately depends on how big the capital plan is in conjunction with that. But I think what we're confident that, you know, we're on top of it, and it looks like it's positive overall. But also we just wanted to convey that, you know, next year's budget process, our intent is to show you both more of a cash budget, so you do see that, have that analysis of, okay, our reserves would do this, we have a deficit or we don't, do we need to play with taxes, do we need to play with reserves, do we want to replenish reserves? That's an easier conversation to have when you're looking at a cash budget, but also showing you the proper financial statements that come along with that in terms of the presentation. So it'll just, that was something that, you know, obviously with the rush and the turnover of staff with this budget was a little bit hampered, but that's something that we're aiming for, so it's more user friendly for you next go around.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, if there's anything that you guys want to, if you look at the budget and you say, you know, maybe we are spending too much, let's cross this off. I mean, it's not too late to do that if you want to. I feel comfortable with all of the stuff that's approved on there. And I mean, I'm like, this is what I do, that I'm paid to do this. I know my stuff pretty good on this, so I honestly think we're on the right track.
So 2022, you'll see a 1.2 deficit, or 2021?
2021, our books are gonna be coming back hopefully by the end of April. And so when those come back and I'm presenting them, it's gonna be in the neighborhood of at least $1 million of a deficit. You know, possibly up to like 1.2-ish, depending on what adjustments are made and whatnot. Like I said, like I could go through all the bank accounts with you guys for the last year, and I show you like we actually have gained money in our bank accounts, so it's purely on paper.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all due to the previous capital, like the shop, this building, where there was lots of renovations done, and unfortunately the effects of those last for, you know, in some cases 20, 30, 50 years, right? So
Is there anything else that you're seeing surprise-wise from different, as you talk about from the general ledger, that you're still sifting through that may come up as surprises for us down the road?
the only thing that I have seen, and I don't think it's gonna bite us that bad, is remember when I mentioned the grants, that there's a deferred revenue account that's in the general ledger, and I have the auditors helping me, and it's kind of tough because there's not a lot of paperwork here that I can find out where this stuff is, or what it even is, or if it's even still eligible.
Mm-hmm.
The only kicker on there is there's over $1 million in this account. I honestly don't think that the majority of it is actual and will just be moved out anyhow. That's the only thing that I could see that will have like a significant effect. There's a few other things that I think may have positive effects, but that's the only significant negative issue.
Okay. Does council have any concerns about what is on this amended budget? Anything that we want to discuss, pull out, add? Hopefully not add, but pull out at this time.
I'm comfortable with it.
I appreciate the explanation to kind of simplify it in a way that those that don't deal with budgets on a regular basis.
Well, that was kind of better with Lyle because he came in here with fresh eyes and he's like, this doesn't make sense to me. So we explained it, we went over it a bit, and we kind of figured out where the gap was, and decided that everyone should know, you know, both sides of things, the books and the actual cash stuff as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, you guys, for straightening stuff out. It's greatly appreciated.
Thanks, gentlemen, and the fact that you guys aren't stressed about it makes me feel a little more comfortable.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I feel comfortable.
great.
I'll make a motion to approve the revised capital and operating budget as presented.
Seconder?
I'll second.
Okay, so motion by Councilman Bell, seconded by Councilor Buttery. Any further comments, questions?
Just a question about the wastewater treatment. We were supposed to receive an update on a study, feasibility study for a new facility out there. Have we seen any of that? I think we were supposed to get it in March, right?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't, I did talk to Ken about it.
Yeah, it's on our radar, but we haven't dug into that one yet. There's a few, obviously there's a few other pressing issues, but that's definitely on the top of the list of many.
Okay, because that engineering firm that was hired was supposed to have a report back.
Yeah, and we do have a budget, I believe, to identify some of the recommendations, the preliminary stuff that we had received, but I will speak to Ken a little bit more about that and get a more definitive answer on when we should have that final report.
So the final's not done, they just have some.
I'm not 100% sure, that's why, yeah, I'll look into it though.
Can we try and see something on that for next meeting?
Sure.
Okay, great. We'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay, motion's carried. We'll move on to 6.4, which is development permit appeals. We'll start with this.
I'm gonna declare conflict.
Yeah, but we're. Oh, yeah. Sorry, this is all you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Yes, thank you. Okay. Lyle, do you want to talk a little bit more about this appeal process?
Sure. So, as I've attempted to outline in the report there, the background, your council's probably more familiar even than I in digging through the file, but essentially there was a permit that was issued as a condition. There was a cash in lieu of some off-street parking requirement that could not be met otherwise, and so the cash in lieu is a means of meeting the requirement in the zoning bylaw. This went, after the permit was issued, the applicant chose to appeal to the Development Appeals Board, and they issued the decision, which is outlined below, and it caused a little bit of confusion, I think, amongst the parties, just because it was a refusal, but also a proposal to appease maybe the applicant, or come up with a solution that would be more agreeable to the applicant. This is something that we reviewed with our planning consultants, and they said that's unusual, that's not really their realm, it's usually a refusal or upholding with provisions, the appeal. But what we've done here is the applicant interpreted it as being part of the ruling, and so we said, well, no, that's not how we interpret it. Neither party appealed to the municipal board. But I said I'd be happy to present it to council with the ruling and with the request of the applicant, which would be to come up with basically a partnership for providing off-street parking in the area, and in exchange she'd be requesting her $3,000 returned. Administration's outlined a few considerations with regards to this. A few questions that certainly arise is it seems unclear or not stipulated in the zoning bylaw how sharing parking, if that's adequate for meeting that sort of arrangement. If council was going to consider it, we would probably recommend stipulating that parking be dedicated to the business during whichever operating hours they have, just to be clear that isn't, if otherwise those parking stalls could be used by others parking there. And really just the issue of the concern about having to continue to deal with a permit that's been issued and appealed, and the ongoing administration associated with that, and perhaps setting a precedent that is not really 100% provided for in the bylaw as is. But so the recommendation is to take no further action with the file and not enter the agreement, but if council is interested in pursuing that, and we would be happy to do that for council.
Question. That $3,000 deposit per se, what is that supposed to be used for? What does that benefit us? Is that meant to try and create more parking spaces downtown, or what's the purpose of that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through the councillor, what we have is that provision is meant to be, it's a payment, and we have to actually hold that separately for future initiatives that would address parking or are related to transportation in the area. There's a number of items that are stipulated in the zoning bylaw that it can be spent on, and one would be development of parking, public parking that could be utilized and alleviate parking concerns in the area. And there's a few other things that are related to transportation I don't have off the top of my head, but I do recall reading that myself as well. As made note that this is not money that's just going into our general operating funds. We have to hold it for potentially a project, so that's something that's important to know.
So, okay, go ahead.
And all businesses pay this to the town?
Only if they don't have parking provisions.
Yeah, I mean, the uniqueness of this file is that, I guess, my understanding from reading the application and the ruling is that this is the first time we collected cash in lieu. I think some of it could have been, the existing businesses were likely either approved under a different zoning bylaw that maybe perhaps didn't have this requirement dating back however far. So this is a bit unique in terms of the first time that we've exercised that clause of the zoning bylaw, or that it was made use of so that we could approve the permit. But I can't speak beyond this current zoning bylaw what happened prior to.
So in the conclusion in this report, so it says to refuse what the appeal was presented, but then it offers an option. So I'm wondering, like, just reading what the option that was given and what the appealant has actually provided, they have satisfied all that. So I'm a bit confused. If the person that's actually gone and done all those extra steps why we are not then following what's been given us as an option.
That's a good, excellent question. That's kind of the crux of the consultant review that we had is, it's not their role to, they can't implement this ruling on council is what their advice was, is this, they've refused the applicant and they've offered a proposal that you could take or leave.
Okay.
So if you're happy to do this, if you're like, yeah, we want to be business friendly, and if it takes a little more administration, no worries, we'll work with them on this as long as they meet whatever stipulations for the off-site parking agreement they'd have with another person would be. We're fine to explore that. It just will be a little tricky. I think they will have to work on the hours designation and also the potential that down the road, if the owner of the current parking stalls withdraws it, then the applicant's going to be back in the same scenario and either trying to find another partnership or having to pay the money again. So it just kind of drags on the permit.
Right, yeah, especially because let's say that does ever get pulled and you're trying to get that money back, I can see being an issue. But on the same token, because it's such a unique situation for me personally, if the appellant has gone and done that extra work to do that, and we want to continue to promote businesses coming into our downtown core, I personally would be okay to look at that as an option. Just because if we're putting more and more barriers for businesses to come into our community, I don't see it as much of an issue personally for me. So I'd be happy to explore that. But what does the rest of council think?
I think the three recommendations that are forward here, I think I'm totally fine with them.
With which one, sorry?
With allowing, giving back the $3,000 with a letter from the neighboring business saying that they'll allot so many parking spaces to them.
Yeah.
And if for some reason that agreement is ever voided or ends, then you have to pay the fee again.
Sorry, Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and it's like I look at that corner, it's brutal to find parking, so I don't really blame the owner of the business for that, and if we are here to promote business, absolutely, right?
One of the questions I have is, and maybe I'm thinking wrong, but I want to check with council. I thought we had a discussion about this, that because there was the three options that were provided in the Development Appeals Board, that council had decided to send this to the Saskatchewan Municipal Board for their final call, because what I understood was that the Development Appeals Board basically just weighs the appeal against the town bylaws, and that they can't go past what the town bylaws are.
No, they can.
They can?
Yeah.
So then if they, is that?
It's, yes, there's a stipulation, they have certain things, they can't be inconsistent with the goals and objectives of your zoning bylaw and your OCP. So as long as it achieves the same similar ends and doesn't fly in the face of anything that's in your zoning bylaw, they can issue a ruling that would be different than both the appellant was asking for and the town was asking for in this case. What we're saying is, and perhaps the error is with the wording of the ruling, it's maybe a poorly worded ruling in terms of they could have just said, we uphold it, like they approve or they side with the applicant or the appellant, but this is the solution they're looking
These are
to
the
implement, not theirs. Like substitute their ruling. And I think that would have been more clear to us, because then it would have been like, now it's a ruling, we must implement it. We wouldn't even be here having this discussion. We would just do the administration.
Yeah.
So because it wasn't clear, and because the planning consultant was like, no, that's not a ruling, I've come to council to make sure that your direction is followed on this matter. So if you're willing to consider the applicant's proposal, that would essentially be option B instead of the recommendation, and council could move that option.
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion that council approve option B, direct administration to prepare an off-site parking agreement with the applicable parties for council consideration no later than May 31st of 2022.
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? I'm just gonna add one quick thing here. I think in this case with the $3,000, and if it's, we're supposed to use it to implement for, because this is such a niche sort of situation, like $3,000 isn't gonna build this parking, and it's not really gonna do anything else. So with that, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion's carried. Councilor Bashar?
Did you go outside for a smoke?
Keaton, do you want to
I mean-
or knock on the bathroom door?
Don't smoke, kids.
Is she keying our cars?
Listening in on the YouTube debate.
Okay, we move on to 6.5, which is the business license for Nikik Digital Solutions. Does anybody have any questions with what's presented? No? Okay, Robbie, you're on the line? Yes?
Yep.
Anything else to add to this or of concern?
No, it's nothing. No, we have nothing else to add. We haven't received any concerns or complaints from any neighbors.
Okay, great.
I'll move to proceed.
And I'll second.
Okay, so motion by Councillor Clausen, seconded by Councillor Vettery. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion's carried. Move to 6.6, which is the business license for Addictive Beauty.
That's 6.5.
Oh.
Sorry.
Nope, 6.5 was Nikik Digital.
Oh.
Is yours showing up differently?
Yeah, 6.4 was Nikik. For me, 6.5 is
No,
business.
6.5 is Nikik.
Do you want to just refresh and see?
Mine too.
So, no. I can follow along. I'll follow.
I can also pull it up here too if you like.
It's alright.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm good. Thank you.
No worries. Just want to make sure you're not missing anything there.
That's different from mine. It's cool.
Okay, so we move on to 6.6, which is Addictive Beauty, request for decision for the discretionary use. Any questions for Robbie?
I'll move to approve the discretionary use application.
Okay, seconder.
I'll second.
Any further comments, questions? Alright, so call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion is carried. Move on to 6.7, which is business license for Nailed It. Nails by Margie. Any questions for Robbie surrounding the request for decision for discretionary use?
I'll move to approve it.
Okay, seconder.
I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion is carried. Move on to 6.7, which is a request for decision for NEQC, and actually we actually have the nomination form already here, which has been sitting in our buckets here. So we've got Councillor Vettery as our first nominee, and then second. Is this Bacchus Joe? Is that right? Okay. So if everybody is good for a 2-year term commencing immediately, I guess, right?
Would council entertain a community member as an alternate for the NSEQC?
I have never had an issue with finding someone that's an expert in the field to replace somebody that's not an expert in the field.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there somebody in mind?
Yeah, there's a physician in our community that has an interest in participating in committees and boards, and they have some background that could be relevant, but also new opportunity for them. So
Okay. Maybe we can request from administration to reach out to
Sure.
that person.
Yeah.
And then maybe just see if Councillor Hrdisky is okay of coming off, or maybe touch base with both
Yeah.
of them.
This item doesn't actually require a motion of council
Okay.
anyway, so you can just.
is there a deadline that we're running against?
We're late apparently.
Yeah, I just know historically that there's been a community, an at-large community member that's been
On most
on this.
boards.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think what we can do is we have the 2 there if we so need. And I can reach out and if get an answer by the end of the week, and then if not, proceed as we had.
Okay. Great. So we don't need a motion for this.
No.
Okay. So we can move on to 7, which is financial statements and updates for budgetary control reports. We can do all of these together, correct? Budgetary control reports, list of accounts for approval, bank reconciliation, and reserve status. Yes.
Yeah, I always have in the past, and in the future we can just present the agenda package that way, where there's financial reports and then the 4 reports itemized in one item with a motion. The only issue will be, of course, if you want to exclude one from the approval, you'll have to amend that motion at that time, but that rarely would be an issue.
I'll make a motion to receive and file the budgetary control report, the list of accounts for approval, the checklisting, the bank reconciliation for March, and the reserve status for the first quarter.
Seconder.
I'll second.
So motion by Councillor McPhail, seconded by Councillor Battery. Any further comments? We'll call the question. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. Motion's carried. Move on to 10, which is new business. 10.1, which is a paving map that I had a free moment in my time and drove through the community because I know that there are various frustrated residents, and even today we're just dealing with a lot of melt. So for me, I know that there's likely a plan in place, but with our Public Works management busy and very busy and sort of switching over with management as well, I want the discussion to happen at this table where we consider doing some significant paving, patching of some key areas, but that does come at a cost, and we already know that we're stretched with that.
Should these not have all been identified in the last plan with Associated?
I mean, yeah, do you want to talk
Yeah, I
about
can
that?
speak to that. In speaking with Ken, they had identified a number of items and they had put together a preliminary estimate, and it was around 400,000. Now, the map that the mayor's provided added a few other spots, so they were wasn't overly scientific, but in the $500,000 plus range, 600,000 on the high side. But again, not having had a lot of time to sit down with Ken and discuss this, I don't know what that extent of those repairs are, what the proposed repair is, how long it will last. There's still a lot of questions, but I would say if council's interested in doing some spot repairs and they wanted to allow an amount of money, we could come back with a more detailed plan, and that would give us direction to do the work.
Just what I've heard throughout the community, there's discussion like, why haven't we throw in sand or gravel or something in these holes to kind of seal them up? Is there a plan to go around and throw some gravel in them?
Well, there was a couple areas that the mayor had pointed out today, and then speaking of Public Works, I think they marked them because they were particularly bad areas, but they wanted to go in tomorrow and hydrovac them before they fill them with that, just to make it an effective solution, or at least an interim solution until we can get a hot mix in there and start tackling normal spot repairs. But if we want to do something more comprehensive, that would be the other money if we're talking about. So.
Yeah, I think just the biggest concern is when there's water in them, you don't know if it's a big hole or not. And
Then your whole car's gone into the road.
Out of curiosity, did this catch? No, I don't think it did. There is a very soft spot in the middle of Louis Road that every time I go up Louis, I just So I don't know if the Public Works has noticed that one, or if they can.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely not a very comprehensive.
Yeah.
I mean, I drove through. I mean, there was still snow, a little bit of snow on the ground as well. I just had the time, but yeah, to me, this is not my job by any means. I just wanted to make sure that it was on our horizon because this should be Public Works. They should be driving our streets, and if they're having issues driving the streets, like all of our residents, like then these should be tackled, and not that we need to wait, because I don't think we can wait on some of them.
The one thing of caution I put on it is I would hate to see us put a bunch of investment, 600,000 potentially, into our streets and have a water line or sewer line fail and us dig up fresh pavement. I think when we've talked about our infrastructure master plan, that we've looked at those types of things to see if we can while we're planning our paving projects, we make sure that we're also looking at what's underneath that. And I would have no problem going to residents saying, look, the roads are going to be rough this year because we're planning on digging everything up, and it might be gravel this year and this coming winter, but next spring we're planning on paving it, and we're going to be putting in a situation where we've completely replaced everything underneath that section of road and fixed your sidewalks and all those kinds of things. That's what I would prefer to see as a long-term solution, rather than just, I say, reacting to the pothole. But I mean, we've had potholes every spring. Every municipality, every city, everywhere has potholes. It's part of living in the north. We have frost heaves, we've got so many muskeg, we've got so much that we're dealing with, corduroy roads, you name it, right? So I mean, part of that is the terrain that we live in, but we also have to be looking at how we're going to replace from the bottom up in this situation. And before we throw a ton of investment, I want to make sure that our plans are reflective of that long-term planning.
That's exactly why I was referring to that associated document, because those things are all identified in there. And did we allow some in our budget for some of those things this year, correct?
Some, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the number?
Offhand, I'm not 100% sure, but I know there is sufficient for some of the repairs for sure.
From my perspective, like, I appreciate that you've done this, and I've done a little bit of driving myself just to kind of experience certain areas, because I know certain areas are worse than others, and there's perennial sinkholes in certain places, things like that. And yeah, that's one of the most visible things that taxpayers will see and complain about, because municipalities pave roads. It's our job. But I do trust administration to prioritize based on available budget, and, you know, work with Public Works to identify those areas that might need a little bit of extra funding. But in the meantime, at least do some simple gravel infill and grading if, you know, there's a patch of bare gravel left over that hasn't been patched with asphalt since a repair or something like that. But just keeping those kind of areas maintained can go a long way, I think. And that's, I'm not involved in operations. I don't like to get involved with those decisions, so I do.
What's the timeline of that? Because I do agree that there must be a plan somewhere for what we know that we're replacing anything underneath. Because I hope that there is. Because yeah, I think that's a great way for us to communicate that to residents. But at the same token, I know that there are some key areas, especially on Studer Street and on Reese Street, that we've neglected for 3 years now. And
Quant as well.
Yeah, Quant as well. Yeah, that we really need to consider. And also, I'm curious about the hookup that's right up front of Co-op 2, which would have been part of the subdivision. Like, are we on the hook for fixing that, or is that something that comes along the lines of the subdivision required it? So was there something in the agreement that would require them to replace that?
That's
It should be to that subdivision.
Should be.
Yeah, I apologize, but like most of this, obviously.
It would be new to you,
Yeah, and even the budget that was presented this year, I wasn't involved in putting the capital together, so I don't know what the strategy was. But certainly I'm hearing that there's a desire to get a strategy in place sooner than later. And I appreciate that. I also appreciate that, you know, where there's safety, where it's bad enough that there's safety, that we be more diligent in identifying and filling. So I can pass those messages along and start working with the AE and the people that have been involved, just to make sure that a plan isn't way off the horizon, that it's going to come forward prior to next budget cycle for sure. And so that you can make decisions on capital next year.
Yeah, can I request that this be done sooner than later, and that be presented next meeting? I know that's a really tight time frame, but there's a lot of discussion happening on it, not to mention the safety element that you pointed out. We have people driving on sidewalks because they're going around it, and to me that's not safe. I mean, that's obviously on the drivers as well, but, you know, at the expense of their cars not getting destroyed. It's just a topic of concern, so.
Just because Councillor Clausen was asking, we do have 72,000, just over 72,000 for roads right now in our budget. We also have a $25,000 for curb repairs that if we needed to, we could, put it towards a higher prioritized item.
Okay.
So close to 100,000 that we could do right now.
And from the meeting that we had with Associated, I don't know, about a month and a half ago, some of those areas, it wouldn't be wise to repair because there's some drainage issues that need to be fixed first. And that's what's causing that pavement to break up.
Yeah,
Moisture in the ground, so it kind of all ties back together with that report that Associated has, so.
I believe council did approve a substantial amount of money to start dealing with some drainage issues, so I do recall that. But I can speak to AE and come up with some kind of a this year plan, a recommendation to council, and we'll come back to the next meeting with that.
With a rough price tag on it.
Yeah, and what they would recommend strategy wise.
I assume that there's a best practice as to how to manage those gravel spots that are awaiting patching, right?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge in the spring, as I think councillors have alluded to around the table, is with the melt and then the stop melt, is every time you go and fix it and then it melts. We've had obviously a lot of snow that's going to melt and then just rub it up again and then have to go back. But if that's the way what we have to do, that's what we have to do. So it just has to be prioritized as a concern.
Okay, great. Do you want a motion for that, or are you okay with?
I'm comfortable with direction of council.
Okay, great. Move on to 10.2, which is, I just wanted to have a verbal follow-up discussion about SUMA, just because all councillors were not available to be there. So just to give you guys a quick idea of what happened at SUMA, I thought it was a really great opportunity for us to voice the North, and I'll tell you personally that I took every opportunity to do that, probably to the point where some of our other councillors might have been embarrassed, but to me the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and we had an opportunity to really ask questions to ministers and the Premier specifically, so that was really awesome. There was a great ability to network, and also have an opportunity to meet with the RCMP at their, not local attachment, but at their offices, and really question some of our like really what we were requesting, and it's, so I just wanted, like, from my side, the biggest thing that I was hearing from a lot of other municipalities, I think that we also face, is the lack of action on the healthcare system. That was a really, really big one. Safety was another big one, and yeah, I think it was really, really successful, and I was really, really proud of our representation there. Jordan or Matt, do you guys want to add anything to that?
No, I think you've covered most of the bases. Yeah, it was a good event, and lots of networking and great meetings and good response. So.
The other thing I would add to it is that any of the sessions that were there, whether it be education sessions or breakout sessions, if you want to get any updates on regional meetings, all the events were recorded. So there is the audio recordings available if you want to hear anything that we stood up for outside of our meeting with the Ministry of Justice. You can go in and take a listen into that. I believe SUMA has it up on their YouTube pages, typically within about a 2-month window. And if, like I said, if there was anything that you were like, shoot, I should have been there for that, you can always go there. And if there's any follow-up questions, I am the alternate Northern Director for SUMA, so you can always give me a call. And secondly, if you need to be in contact with any SUMA staff members, you're more than welcome to once again reach out to me or SUMA directly and see kind of where things went or where some project files are at as well. So a really good convention all around. It was really great to get to know some mayor and councillors outside of the table, and hopefully next year we were all able to go. I know that even in our regional partnerships in previous years to 2020, because the 2020 and 2021 conventions were virtual, I know that we've had the opportunity to sit and have a meal and kind of discuss some regional goals that we might have with our village of Arange. and it's usually very productive, and hopefully next year we have some more people attend.
Great. Do you guys have any questions that were not there?
Oh, I just wanna thank you guys for attending.
Yeah, thanks for representing. I unfortunately couldn't get
No,
away.
and you know what? I totally get it. But like, and it was the first thing. It was my first time too. It was really great and really eye opening. So I think that you guys would have great voices there too if you guys are able to attend next year.
Cool.
So fingers crossed. Go.
One thing I did want to mention for next year as well, I do think from a operation standpoint, it would be really good to have our public works manager attend the trade show at least for a day, be approved to do that. I think there's a really good opportunity for them to network themselves in with some professionals as well as some professional services. There was lots of obviously really cool things that we were able to see as the counselors, but to take that from a trade show or from the convention and bring that here and actually see it actualized, we actually would have to get deeper into operations than we ever want to be. So if we had our public works manager there, they can see how certain projects or certain products there would maybe tie into their daily routines and make it easier. They know their jobs best, and it would be awesome to see them attend for at least a day to just go to the trade show.
Having attended before, I always enjoyed going and seeing the heavy machinery and the salesman there, but means nothing to me in the grand scheme.
All I can say is that after 2 years of a pandemic and everyone staying at home, there was definitely some heavy machinery around this convention this year.
Okay, great. So we'll move on to 10.3, which is the environmental fees and request for direction surrounding that. So this is something like how many complaints are we talking here that are coming through?
I've had about 3, but I've actually, like, at the front, I've talked to the staff about it, and they say that they've had lots of people coming in and asking what the purpose of this specific fee is, and no one's really 100% sure. And different people within the office have different ideas on how it works and stuff like that. And we do have the bylaw that describes what it is, but it may not be 100% clear, or may need to be tweaked a little bit. I'm not sure.
Where does this just come in as revenue, or what? Like, where does this fee go to?
So the fee basically it goes into the waste portion of the budget. So for example, the regional waste management amount that we pay in the budget, I believe is around $200,000. So we collect this fee that helps offset those costs, as well as the internal costs of delivering removal services to those that have removal services. So essentially it's about a $300,000 budget. About $100,000 is our internal removal costs, and then the $200,000 is to operate the regional entities. So we collect about an amount that's a little less than the amount that we send to the regional entity. So, and because the bylaw currently states it includes the actual disposal and treatment of the waste, that fee is justifiably being charged to everyone. Now, certainly in the future, if we wanted to either create a second fee that was just a collection fee versus a fee that everyone pays, because everyone's waste goes to that place, that would be something, and that's kind of what we've identified here, is if council is comfortable with the way the bylaw reads now and the message that we've been sending accordingly to residents, that nothing needs to be done, or, you know, we're putting various bylaws on our list of things to do in the future and update. So if this is something that council would like to revisit. So essentially what we've asked council here in the discussion is, in the future, what's the desired level? So the fee only covers, as I mentioned, about 2/3 of the cost of delivering the service. The rest is picked up by the taxpayer, right? So that portion of the budget is funded about $200,000 by fees, $100,000 by taxes. If we wanted to recover all the costs by taxes or fees, we could tweak that, but that's what it is right now. And if you wanted to look at a 2-tier fee, so that those that had private collection were paying a different amount than people that had both their waste treated but also picked up, that would be something we could look at implementing as well. So that's essentially the two items that we're looking for feedback on is what is the cost share of fees versus taxes that you're comfortable with, and do you want to see a two-tiered fee for those that only don't have the collection service?
How cumbersome would that be to implement?
And that to Trevor.
Well, first we'd have to figure out who would be applicable and whatnot, but I mean, it's not impossible. But
It'd be a fair amount of work, and then the ones that are paying for or that are getting collection and the disposal fees, their rates are probably gonna have to go up. And then the ones that aren't gonna get theirs are gonna have to lower, and trying to find inequality in there somewhere might be a little bit challenging.
administratively, it would be easier just to have one fee, but the complaint is that people that don't have garbage pickup are saying, why do I have to pay this when I'm not getting that service? But
Well, being on the waste management board and understanding some of the capital costs that have just been incurred by the regional waste, the contribution, my understanding of this, from the town's perspective has been that every property is given a little tiny piece of the fee, $120 a year per property, I think it is.
Yeah.
Which is not a ton. And that is for the actual landfill and those services and the town's contribution to it, and the kind of user fee portion that the taxpayers pick up. That's because you get your waste collected, even though. So I have heard the argument of there's only, it's a monopoly for commercial waste pickup and bins in the community, in the region. But that's out of the realm of the town to really do anything about. And I do, if I recall correctly, I don't know if administration or other councillors that have been serving for a while remember this. Was there not an option, because there's certain commercial businesses downtown that have rollout bins, was there not a provision or an amendment made to this bylaw to allow for commercial businesses to pay an extra $10 per bin if they got multiple bins and not have the private waste collection?
I don't remember that.
If Mr. Bender's still hanging around on the line, I believe he would know.
Well, the bylaws in your packet, you can bring it up.
It was talked about, we did talk about it just this
Yeah,
week.
because there are businesses downtown that I recall do have multiple rollout bins and no private collection. So I see Mr. Bender's hands up.
Go ahead, Robbie.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess previous discussions with the previous administrators, Mr. Brennan, he brought the attention that there are businesses that do have multiple roll-up bins, but they only paid $10 a month, so we were working towards changing that amendment to say, if you're on 2 bins, you pay $20, or 3 bins, you pay $30. Then in the bylaw, there is separate rates for separate entities, like for dwelling units and apartments. If you want to have a roll-up bin, you pay so much per bin. And it's in the appendix there of the bylaw.
And I think
But that amendment went forward to say, I think the Legion might have 3 bins, but they only pay $10. But I know the Bayview Apartments, they have how many 80 units, but they pay 80 times $10. So, but they don't pay for roll-up bins.
Go ahead, Councillor Better.
Would it be easier just to get rid of the environmental fees and then just add it into the taxes when we pay them?
It's totally up to council. It's kind of a philosophical question with all services that
It's like how
municipalities
shop
offer.
supplies, right?
How much do you want this to be paid by the actual users of the service, and how much do you want to be funded by the taxpayers because there's a benefit to everyone for treating this? So in this case, you've got 2/3 of the cost being covered by the user fees, 1/3 by the taxes. And if you wanted the people that got collection services to cover the other third, essentially we'd have to implement another fee to them that would be about 50% of the fee they pay for the environmental fee.
So this environmental fee is for garbage?
It's for waste collection and treatment, yeah.
Go ahead, Robbie.
Thank you. I was just gonna say, environmental fee, and I think the file was late environmental fee, but yeah, it's for waste collection and garbage pickup, in my opinion.
Mm.
And I guess just the other side, I mean, people still have to pay, the commercial businesses pay their private companies to dump they pay their waste tipping fees at the dump, right? So aren't people being double charged?
Yeah.
But an extra $10 as a property contributing to the overall longevity and management of landfill. I don't.
But the only question I'd have is like if it's the fees that they would pay for tipping fees, is it reflective of the same weight scale that a resident, like if I take my trailer in and do an extra dump of household garbage, would I be charged the same thing as the big truck coming in with the big?
The
Per weight, yes.
yeah,
Per
for
weight, yes.
the actual refuse, but those commercial bins come with monthly rental fees
Mhm.
and tipping fees and moving fees, and so they have all the additional costs of running their equipment and that kind of thing on top of, say you roll in with your quarter ton and you have your yard of waste or.
But the tipping fees, the collection fees, and all that does not go to our tax base. It goes to the private business.
That is direct cost to the
Mhm.
business.
Right, and the money collected in those fees does not come to the town.
No.
That is the sustainability model of the private business that is picking up
Yes.
the garbage. So the environmental fee, to me, is what is going to contribute to the long-term sustainability of our landfill,
Mhm.
right? So to me, it's an additional fee, but our fee is separate and apart from everything else that the private business is providing, because if I take an extra load in myself, and the amount that the big commercial building, if the big commercial truck, if they were getting charged an additional 15 to 20% than what I would as a resident, then I would say remove the $10, because it's being seen as that extra money that is going into our regional landfill, that would be paying for the long-term sustainability of our landfill. But if it isn't being charged any additional premium, then they should pay the same $10 that everybody else is paying. That's my take on it.
So just to simplify, the way I would explain this to a resident if they called would be essentially, yes, we collect an environmental fee. It almost covers the cost that we give to the Regional Waste Management Commission, who deals with the waste and has all the costs associated with dealing with the waste. The part that is collection currently is covered by taxes. And they could say, well, I pay taxes and I don't get collection. And I would say, I understand, and there's probably other things in the community that you pay taxes for that you don't get benefit of either. Maybe they say they don't use the rec center or whatever the issue is. Whether that's right or wrong, that's council's decision of how you want to have taxes or user fees for this service. But that's essentially how I would simplify it to a resident if they said, well, why am I paying this fee? Everyone pays it because it goes to the Regional Waste Management Commission.
Do commercial properties pay education property tax?
Yes.
Yeah.
No institution goes to school, but you need a good school in your area to sustain your business. And I would use the same model that we have on an environmental fee to maintain our landfill. So for me, I see no action needed on this personally, and that's where I'll stand on
Except
that.
the bylaw we have in front of us seems to be way out of date.
How many complaints did we get? Like, was it a substantial amount, or?
Trevor said you said
Well,
3.
yeah, like in my time, I've had about 3, and one of them was very forceful, saying like, I deserve to have my money back because I don't have my garbage picked up by the town. And I mean, if that's the way that the direction is, then fine.
But that fee isn't also specific to picking up, it's to sustain that facility
It's
out there
to
for the most
sustain.
part.
It's for the town's
We
contribution
just want to
the
clarify
regional
so that
landfill.
we can tell
Yeah.
the receptionist, we can tell finance staff,
Yeah.
look, if you get a complaint, this is the message you deliver. Council's reviewed this is the way they would like it to be. Can we clean up the bylaw and revisit it? Of course, we can do that when we get to it. But we just wanted to make sure that when we get to that point, if there is something dramatic you wanted to investigate changing, that we get that feedback now.
And what I'll also state on that matter is, we at this table decide the policy, and I understand that administration's job is to enforce it. And if somebody is raking you over the coals over a policy decision, tell them to call us, right? Like, really,
Well-
I will take that call any day of the week. So, please.
Yeah, the main issue is just we weren't sure where the direction was, so now that
Yeah.
we have the direction, perfectly clear.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody pays it.
Great. So we don't need any changes here or motions, correct?
Correct.
Okay, excellent. We'll move on to 10.4. This is just an information piece for council, just so you guys are aware. The Canadian Embassy of Lithuania has contacted me, which I think is really exciting that they even found Larange. And it's just an opportunity for us to represent ourselves on the international stage. There's no cost to the town for this. They're going to be paying potentially for flights and hotels, and if they can't, I get benefits through my work that I can help them out. I just think it would be a really great opportunity to connect with the world, and that area of the world specifically, they don't have a lot of the laws in place that have that equality. So I think that this is just something I wanted to bring to your attention, that I'm going to be doing everything in my power to be able to attend, and I think that it's really neat. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention.
That is cool.
Okay, great. That is the agenda. Unless there's anything else that anyone else needs to bring forward at this time.
I don't need any decision on it. There was one thing that I wanted to bring up, and it came up at the citizen convention, and I should have brought this up at 10.2. There was conversation about FCM being held in Regina, and if people wanted to put that through their calendars, I think it's first week of June in Regina. So normally they're held not in Saskatchewan. So it's a really good opportunity for us to do something similar to SUMA, but it's basically Canadian municipalities rather than just Saskatchewan. So I don't know if we can put that on the agenda item for next meeting to have a discussion whether or not we can send some delegates to that, because I believe we do pay membership fees for it. So
Yeah.
just flagging that.
When is the date? First week in June, you said?
I believe it's the first week of June, June 2nd to something. I think 2nd to 5th.
I think it's worth council talking about, yeah.
Yeah, so if we can add that to agenda item for our next one would be great. And then, especially since we had a couple councillors that we're not able to make, there should be some funds somewhere that we can pull, and if we decide a couple people want to go, I think it'd be great. Okay, great. Just need a motion from the camera, please.
Also moved.
Second, Peter?
I'll second.
Okay, so a motion by Councillor Vettery, seconded by Councillor Bashar. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion's carried. We'll move to in camera. Let me just turn this off and let's do a 5-minute recess.
I gotta say,
Cole, did you provide a picture for the test website?
No, I didn't. Did you see my email to
It's
Lyle?
only
No.
the one page. It
Hold on.
changes
I
as you
know,
go.
I'm just
Okay.
giggling.
I think it's because it's a nice northern
And it's
lights
not even the
picture
right
that's
name on the plane. Not that they ever paint their planes.
just scrub it.
Yeah. just blur.
Paid advertising if they want to
Blur.
be on there.
No, you know what?